The alarm went off at 5 a.m., shrill and relentless. Outside, the Florida sky was still dark, the streets damp from the night's humidity. A salty breeze slipped through the cracked window frame, carrying with it the faint smell of ocean and mildew. For a moment, I lay still, staring at the water-stained ceiling and willing myself to find some strength hidden somewhere inside me. But all I felt was exhaustion pressing down like a heavy weight. Ethan was still asleep on the small bed, pushed against the living room wall. His tiny body looked even smaller beneath the threadbare blanket, his face pale and frail in the dim light. I gently pulled the blanket higher around his shoulders and touched his forehead, just to make sure no fever had crept in overnight. His skin was cool, but his body trembled slightly, as if he were fighting something much bigger than any childhood illness. Cancer has a way of stealing pieces of your child every day, and you stand there, powerless, watching it happen. On the couch, just a few steps away, Tom lay sprawled out, the stench of cheap whiskey hanging thick in the air. He hadn't always been like this. Once he was a husband who made Ethan laugh until he hiccuped, who kissed me on the cheek before heading out to work his delivery route. But ever since the doctor said the word cancer last year, something inside him shattered. He lost his job, lost his drive, and slowly drowned himself in alcohol. I walked into our kitchen, if you could even call it that, just a tiny corner with a humming old fridge and a sink stain from years of use. The fridge door groaned as I opened it, revealing its usual emptiness. A couple of boiled potatoes from last night sat lonely on the middle shelf. That would have to be breakfast. I poured some water into a chipped glass, glanced at my dry, cracked hands, and forced a bitter smile. 2 jobs will do that to you. Housekeeping at the beach hotel by day, scrubbing dishes at a diner by night. But I couldn't stop. I wouldn't stop. Ethan needed me to keep going. A faint sound behind me made me turn. Ethan was awake, blinking at me with tired eyes, but still trying to smile. "I'm okay, Mom," he whispered, his voice raspy and weak. My throat tightened as I knelt beside his bed, smoothing his hair back gently. "Just rest a little longer, sweetheart. I'll get your breakfast ready and bring you your meds." He gave me a tiny nod before curling back under the blanket. I glanced at Tom again, still dead to the world, one arm dangling off the side of the couch, his mouth slightly open, breathing out that sour mix of liquor and regret. A part of me wanted to shake him, scream at him to wake up and be the husband and father we needed. But I didn't have the energy to fight him. Not today. Maybe not anymore. All I could do was keep moving, keep working, and keep praying for some kind of miracle. I didn't know it yet, but a miracle was on its way. Ethan stirred again, just as I was placing a cup of water on the small table near his bed. His lips were pale, his eyes glassy. "Mom, my leg hurts," he whispered, barely loud enough for me to hear. I froze for half a second, then forced a calm smile. "Okay, sweetheart, let's get you your meds." I went straight to the top shelf of our old cabinet where I always kept his prescriptions, pain relievers and expensive pills meant to keep the worst at bay. My fingers brushed against nothing. My stomach tightened as I reached farther back, thinking maybe I'd moved the box last night. But there was only a scattering of empty blister packs and shards of broken glass. I crouched down, staring at the floor. The pill bottle had fallen and shattered, or had it been thrown? Half of the precious medicine was gone, tiny fragments of white powder scattered like dust. My chest tightened. Those pills cost more than I made in 3 shifts combined. "No, no, no," I muttered, crawling across the floor to salvage what I could. A few capsules remained intact, but nowhere near enough. "Mom, is everything okay?" Ethan's voice shook, small and frightened. I forced my voice steady. "It's fine, baby, just a little mess. I'll take care of it." But inside, my pulse was pounding. How could this have happened? I always put them out of reach. And then I saw him, Tom, leaning against the doorway, eyes half open, a half-empty bottle of cheap whiskey dangling from his hand. His lips curled in something between a smirk and a wince. Needed some cash, he mumbled. You know, for important things. He took a slow sip, like it was the most natural thing in the world. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. He sold Ethan's medicine. My hands trembled so badly, I nearly cut myself on the broken glass. The rage hit so fast it scared me. I lunged at him, shoving his chest with both hands. You sold your own son's meds? Are you insane? My voice cracked, filled with a kind of pain even I hadn't heard from myself before. Tom barely flinched, just shrugged and muttered, We'll figure it out. We always do. That was it. No apology, no shame. Before I could say another word, Donna from next door stepped inside. She must have heard the shouting, her gray hair still in curlers, holding a worn robe closed at her chest. What on earth is going on in here? She asked, eyes darting between me, Tom, and Ethan on the bed. Her expression hardened when she saw the broken bottle and scattered pills. You need to get out of my way, Tom, I snapped, grabbing Ethan's small backpack and stuffing what little medicine I had left into it. I lifted him carefully into my arms, feeling the weight, or rather the lightness, of his frail body. We're going to the hospital right now. Tom muttered something under his breath, but I didn't care. Donna stepped closer to him, glaring. You ought to be ashamed of yourself. Tom Miller, she said firmly, then turned to me. Go, Sarah. I'll handle him. I didn't wait. I bolted out the door barefoot, Ethan clinging to my neck. The humid morning air slapped me in the face as I ran toward the street, praying some kind of ride would pass by soon. My tears blurred the world around me, but I kept moving, clutching my boy like my life depended on it because his life did. The emergency room doors slid open with a whoosh as I rushed inside, Ethan limp in my arms. A nurse at the desk looked up, startled, and immediately waved me forward. This way, ma'am. Within seconds, they had Ethan on a gurney. A doctor and 2 nurses swarmed around him, their voices calm but fast, asking questions I barely heard. My mind was a blur. I stood there gripping the strap of his backpack like it was a lifeline. A nurse gently touched my shoulder. Ma'am, we've got him. Let's step over here so they can work. I followed her numbly to a chair in the corner and sat down, burying my face in my hands. I tried to breathe, but my chest felt too tight, like someone had wrapped a belt around my ribs and pulled hard. The image of broken pills and Tom's glassy eyes kept flashing through my head. I wanted to scream, to tear something apart, but I couldn't. I had to stay focused on Ethan. Minutes crawled by before a doctor approached. His face was serious, but his voice was calm. Your son's stable for now, but he's going to need his full medication regimen back on track. Without it, he's at high risk. We also need to discuss his next round of treatments. Surgery may have to happen sooner than we planned. I nodded automatically. Okay, yes, whatever he needs. The doctor's eyes softened. These treatments, they're expensive. I need to be honest with you. His words sliced right through me. Expensive. Like I didn't already know. I swallowed hard. I'll find a way. I promise I will. My voice broke at the end. When he left, I sat there alone in the stark white room, hands clasped so tightly my knuckles turned white. I had nothing left. No savings, no backup plan, no partner I could count on. Just me, 2 jobs, and bills that never stopped coming. A warm hand touched my arm, and I looked up to see Donna standing there. She must have followed us from the apartment. Her kind eyes took one look at my face and seemed to understand everything without a word being said. Honey, she said softly, you don't have to do this all by yourself. I shook my head. Donna, I can't. There's no one left to ask. There's always someone, she said gently. I know a man, a good man. We grew up together, and he's done well for himself. He's helped people before. Let me call him. Let me at least try. For a second, I hesitated. I hated asking for help. I hated feeling like I couldn't handle things on my own. But then I looked at Ethan lying on that hospital bed, his small chest rising and falling in shallow breaths, and I knew my pride didn't matter anymore. I nodded. Okay, Donna. Please try. Her lips curved into a soft smile. Good. We'll figure this out, Sarah. You're not alone. For the first time all morning, a flicker of hope nudged its way through my fear. 3 days later, I came home from my evening shift at the diner, still smelling faintly of dish soap and fried food. My feet ached and every muscle in my back screamed, but I didn't care. Ethan had smiled at me earlier, a real smile, and that was enough to keep me going. I almost missed it at first. A plain white envelope sat on the edge of our small kitchen table, next to a chipped coffee mug. It looked ordinary, except for the golden seal stamped on the corner. Sunrise Children's Foundation. My breath caught. I froze, staring at it as if it might vanish if I blinked too hard. Hands trembling, I tore it open and unfolded the letter inside. Dear Mrs. Miller, after reviewing your application, the board of the Sunrise Children's Foundation has approved full financial assistance for your son, Ethan Miller. This grant will cover all medical costs related to his upcoming surgery, as well as necessary follow-up treatments. Your family has our support during this difficult time. I read those words 3 times, each one hitting me like a wave. My knees buckled, and I slid into the nearest chair. Full financial assistance, all costs covered. I didn't even realize I was crying until tears splashed onto the paper, blurring the ink. Mom. Ethan's voice drifted from the living room, weak but curious. Are you okay? I wiped my face quickly and smiled through my tears. I'm more than okay, sweetheart. We got help. They're going to pay for your surgery. You're going to get better. His little eyes widened, a flicker of life returning to them. Really? Really? I hugged him gently, careful not to squeeze too hard. He leaned into me, and for the first time in months, I felt the weight of dread lift, replaced by something I hadn't dared to feel. Hope. But as the initial shock faded, a question lingered in the back of my mind, whispering over and over. Who sent this? Why us? I hadn't expected anyone to actually read my desperate emails, let alone respond with something so life-changing. Donna stopped by later that night, carrying a plate of her famous banana bread. She saw the letter on the table and smiled knowingly. Looks like someone out there's watching over you too. I just don't understand, I admitted. This kind of help doesn't just fall out of the sky. Someone had to push this through. Someone with influence. Donna gave me a long, thoughtful look, then placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. Sarah, sometimes life gives us a miracle when we least expect it. Don't question it too much, just hold on to it. And trust me, whoever did this, did it for the right reasons. I nodded slowly, but deep down I knew this wasn't over. Miracles don't just happen without a story behind them, and I was about to find out exactly what that story was. I waited until the next morning to tell Tom. I'd been up half the night, rehearsing what to say, imagining how he might react. A part of me hoped he'd finally smile, that maybe, just maybe, this news would sober him up enough to see a future beyond the bottle. He was in the kitchen, already nursing a drink, when I came in holding the letter. Tom, I said carefully, we got help. A foundation is covering all of Ethan's medical expenses, his surgery, the treatments, everything. I held out the paper like an olive branch. For a moment, his brow furrowed as if trying to process my words. Then, slowly, his eyes narrowed. A foundation? Just like that. You think I'm stupid? I blinked. Excuse me. He took another swig from his glass and slammed it down on the counter. Nobody pays for something like that out of the goodness of their heart. Who's helping you, Sarah? Who are you seeing behind my back? My jaw dropped. What? Tom, no one. He cut me off, voice rising. You're gone half the night working at that diner. Maybe that's where you met him. Some rich guy, right? Someone who doesn't have to look at his kid and feel like a failure every day. The word stung like a slap, but anger quickly replaced the shock. Are you kidding me? I'm working 2 jobs to keep our son alive while you sit here drowning in whiskey. And now you're accusing me of cheating. My voice shook, but not from fear. This was months of frustration boiling over. Donna, who had heard the shouting through the thin walls, stepped into the doorway. "That's enough, Tom," she said firmly. "Do you even hear yourself? Your wife is fighting for your son's life, and you're tearing her down because you can't face your own guilt." Tom's glare softened for just a second, but his pride wouldn't let him back down. "You don't know what it's like, Donna. You don't know what it's like to watch your kid suffer and not be able to do a damn thing." Donna crossed her arms. "I do know, Tom. I buried my own daughter when she was Ethan's age. And let me tell you something. Grief is no excuse to stop fighting. Sarah hasn't stopped. Why have you?" The room went quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator. Tom looked away, muttering something under his breath. But it didn't matter. The damage was done. I took a step forward, voice steady now. "This isn't about your pride, Tom. This is about Ethan. He's getting his surgery, whether you like how it happened or not. And if you can't be part of that, then at least don't stand in the way." Tom didn't answer. He just sank into a chair, head in his hands. For the first time, I saw something in him other than anger. A flicker of shame, maybe even fear. Donna put a hand on my shoulder. "Sarah, why don't you step outside for a bit? I'll talk to him." I nodded, my heart pounding. As I stepped onto the porch, I sucked in a deep breath of warm Florida air, heavy with salt and the distant scent of magnolia. For a moment, I let myself hope this argument had cracked something open inside Tom, something that could be repaired. I didn't know then that Donna was about to uncover the truth behind the miracle, and that truth would change everything. That evening, Donna knocked on my door, a determined look on her face. She held her phone in one hand, reading glasses perched on the tip of her nose. "Sarah, honey, we need to talk," she said, stepping inside without waiting for me to answer. I closed the door behind her, sensing the weight in her voice. "What is it? Is something wrong with the foundation?" She shook her head slowly. "No, the foundation's real, and what they're offering is legitimate. But I made a call to an old friend who works with them, and I found out who pushed your application to the top." She paused, looking me right in the eye. It was Matthew Miller. The name meant nothing to me at first. "Matthew? Who?" Donna exhaled. "Tom's older brother." I froze. Tom doesn't have a brother. He told me he was an only child. Donna removed her glasses, rubbing her forehead. "Sweetheart, I'm sorry, but he does. Matthew's made quite a life for himself. He's a tech entrepreneur in Atlanta, very successful and apparently very private. He saw your application and expedited everything anonymously for Ethan." I sank into a chair, gripping the edge of the table as if it could steady me. Why would Tom lie about that? Why would he pretend Matthew doesn't exist? Donna sat across from me, her voice softer now. "From what I've heard, those two had a falling out years ago. Something bad enough that Tom cut all ties. Pride, stubbornness, guilt, who knows? But Matthew didn't forget him, Sarah. He didn't forget Ethan." My thoughts spun. An anonymous donor, his own brother. How could Tom hate someone who just saved our son's life? And more importantly, how could I tell him? Donna reached across the table, her hand warm and steady on mine. "I know it's not my place, but you can't keep this from him. Secrets like this, they only make wounds worse. If there's any chance this could mend things, you have to try." I bit my lip, staring down at the letter still lying on the table. "You don't understand how Tom's been, Donna. He's barely holding on as it is. If I tell him, it could push him over the edge. Or," she said gently, "it could pull him back." We sat there in silence for a long moment, the hum of the old fridge filling the space between us. Finally, I nodded. "You're right. He needs to know." Donna gave my hand a squeeze. "Whatever happens, you're not alone in this, Sarah. I'm right here." Later that night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, listening to Tom snore from the other room. I thought about the brother he never mentioned, the kindness he'd rejected, and the bitterness he'd carried for so long. I thought about Ethan, our little boy fighting for every breath, and I knew the truth couldn't stay hidden. Tomorrow I would tell him. No matter how ugly it got, no matter how much it hurt, he needed to know who had given us this miracle and why it mattered. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual, not because of my alarm, but because my heart wouldn't let me sleep. I sat at the kitchen table, that letter from the foundation lying in front of me like a weight. Today, there would be no avoiding it. Tom shuffled in, looking worse than usual, rubbing his face and heading straight for the fridge. He didn't even look at me before grabbing a bottle of water. Thankfully, not whiskey this time. "You're up early," he muttered. I took a deep breath. "We need to talk, Tom." His shoulders stiffened. "If this is about yesterday," I already said, it's not about yesterday. It's about your brother, Matthew." He froze like I'd slapped him. Slowly, he turned toward me, eyes narrowing. "What did you just say?" "Matthew Miller, your brother. He's the reason we got help. He's the one who pushed our application through." Tom's jaw clenched, his face hardening. "That's a lie." "No, it isn't," I said, my voice steady. Donna checked. "It came from him, Tom. Your brother saved Ethan's life." He laughed once, bitter and sharp. Of course she'd say that. You and Donna, always meddling. "Matthew doesn't care about me. He never did. He left me behind, left Mom behind, and now you want me to believe he's swooping in like some kind of hero." I stood up, my hands shaking but firm. "This isn't about you, Tom. It's about Ethan. He's 6 years old, he has cancer, and your brother, whatever history you two have, just gave him a chance to live. Are you really going to let your pride get in the way of that?" His voice rose, raw and hoarse. "You don't know what he did to me. He was the golden boy, straight A's, full scholarship, big dreams, while I stayed behind and worked dead-end jobs. When things got bad, he left. He left me here to pick up the pieces." His voice cracked. "He didn't even come to Dad's funeral." I took a step closer, lowering my voice. "And yet, here he is, helping your son. Helping our son. You think that's about you?" "Maybe he regrets the past, Tom. Maybe he's trying to make things right the only way he knows how." For a moment, his anger faltered, replaced by something far more fragile, shame. He sat down heavily at the table, burying his face in his hands. I can't look at him, Sarah. I've been such a screw-up. I can't stand the thought of him seeing me like this." I knelt beside him, resting a hand on his arm. "Then don't stay like this. You can change. For Ethan. For us. For yourself. But right now, what matters is that you don't throw away this chance because you're afraid of what he might think. Ethan needs both of you, whether you like it or not." For a long time, he didn't answer. Just sat there, his breathing shaky, his hands trembling slightly. Finally, he whispered, "I don't deserve him, or you." Tears pricked my eyes, but I kept my voice calm. "This isn't about deserving, Tom. This is about doing the right thing now. We're flying out tomorrow morning for Ethan's surgery. You can either stay here and keep drinking, or you can come with us and start being his dad again." He lifted his head, eyes red but focused in a way I hadn't seen in months. "If I come, if I try, will you even trust me again?" I hesitated, then nodded slowly. "Trust is earned, Tom, but I'm willing to let you try." For the first time in a long while, he reached across the table and took my hand, not in desperation, but in something closer to resolve. "Okay," he said quietly. "I'll come, and I'll make this right." For the first time since all of this began, I believed him. The next morning came too fast. I barely slept, but for once, it wasn't from dread, it was from anticipation. Ethan's surgery was waiting on the other side of this trip, and thanks to Matthew's donation, every penny was already covered. Tom was awake when I walked into the living room, already dressed in clean jeans and a plain shirt. His eyes looked clearer, almost sober. He held something in his hands, a small blue toy car, its paint chipped from years of use. I recognized it immediately. It was Ethan's favorite before the treatments took away his energy to play. "I found this in his old box," Tom said quietly, turning it over. Figured he'd want it with him. A lump rose in my throat. That's a good idea, Tom." We rode to the airport in silence. Ethan curled up against me in the back seat, clutching his little backpack, while Tom stared out the window. The Florida sun was bright that morning, sharp and warm, but the knot in my stomach kept me grounded. At the terminal, I balanced Ethan's paperwork and tickets while Tom walked slightly behind us, almost like he wasn't sure if he belonged there. When we reached security, Ethan looked up at him and smiled weakly. "Dad, you're really coming?" Tom knelt down and placed the blue toy car in Ethan's hand. "Yeah, buddy, I'm really coming, and I'm not going anywhere this time." Ethan's small fingers wrapped around the car, and he threw his arms around his father's neck. For a moment, Tom just froze, and then I saw something shift in his face, guilt melting into something softer, raw. He hugged his son tight, blinking rapidly. "I'm sorry, kiddo. I'm so sorry I wasn't there when you needed me." "You're here now," Ethan whispered back, as if that was all that mattered. I stood there watching them, tears blurring my vision. After months of anger and resentment, I was seeing something I'd almost given up on. Tom choosing to be a father again. We sat together in the waiting area, Ethan leaning on Tom's shoulder while I filled out medical forms. When the boarding announcement echoed overhead, Tom straightened, glancing at me nervously. "Sarah, do you really think I can fix this? Everything I've screwed up." I looked at him for a long moment. "I think you can try, and that's more than you've done in a long time." On the plane, Ethan fell asleep halfway through the safety demonstration, clutching that toy car. Tom kept looking at him, then at me, like he was seeing us for the first time in years. At one point, he whispered, "I'm done drinking, Sarah. I'm done running. I need to get my life back for him, for you, for me." Something inside me eased, not forgiveness, not yet, but hope. "Then start when we land," I said quietly, "one step at a time." By the time the plane touched down near the hospital where Ethan's surgery would take place, Tom was still gripping his son's hand, his knuckles white as if letting go might undo everything. And for the first time in months, I didn't feel like I was carrying this weight alone. Tomorrow, Ethan would go into surgery, and for the first time, I believed we'd come out of it not just with a healthier son, but with a family that had a chance to heal. The next day felt like it stretched on forever. Watching Ethan being wheeled into surgery was one of the hardest things I've ever done. But I held onto his hand until the last possible moment, whispering, "You're going to be okay, sweetheart. Mom and Dad will be right here when you wake up." Tom stood beside me the whole time, his hands stuffed in his pockets, shoulders tense, but he didn't leave. Not once. Hours passed, and we sat together in that waiting room. No shouting, no blame, just quiet. At one point, Tom spoke softly, almost to himself. "I can't believe I almost lost all of this, lost him, because I was too proud and too scared to face my past." I didn't answer, but I reached over and took his hand. He squeezed it gently, a silent promise he wasn't going anywhere. When the surgeon finally came out and said the words we had prayed for, the procedure went well. I collapsed into tears of relief. Tom pulled me into his arms without hesitation, and for once, it felt like we were on the same side again. The following week was a blur of hospital meals, doctor check-ins, and Ethan slowly regaining his strength. Tom stayed sober, showing up every day, helping with everything from paperwork to holding Ethan's hand during physical therapy. He even signed up for a local support group, something I never thought I'd see him do. One evening, as I sat by Ethan's bedside, I found another envelope slipped under the door. Inside was a handwritten note. "Tom, family is family. I've made mistakes too. When you're ready, I'd like to talk." Matthew Tom read it twice, his eyes glassy. He didn't say anything at first, just folded it carefully and slid it into his pocket like something precious. Finally, he whispered, I think I'm ready to call him. I smiled, feeling something shift deep in my chest. Healing wasn't quick, and it wasn't easy, but it had started. Right here, in this hospital room with our little boy, sleeping peacefully after a successful surgery. Weeks later, when we finally flew home, Ethan held that same blue toy car, the one Tom had given him at the airport. Mom, he said, looking out the window at the clouds, Dad's different now. I glanced at Tom, who was dozing in the seat next to him, one hand still wrapped gently around Ethan's small fingers. Yeah, baby, I whispered back. He really is. And for the first time in a long, long while, I believed it.